What's up, my dude? Supercross 5, the official video game. So, just wanted to come in here and talk about this. Pretty much guarantee you we're going to get a Supercross 5 at this point, and probably a Supercross 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, it's kind of crazy that this series has turned into this. I pretty much expected it, to be honest, with how big the first game was and how much it made for Milestone. It was just, I just knew they wasn't going to let that one go, right? So here we are. Supercross 4 is about to come out in a couple months. So I just wanted to come in here and kind of chitty-chat a little bit about, kind of where they've been, where they're going, what they could do with Supercross 5, that kind of thing. So obviously, one big thing from all of their games, even back to the very first Supercross game, is the terrain deformation. There's just no doubt about it. That is one of the biggest lacking things they've had the entire time. You can go back to the first Supercross game, second Supercross game. It's all the same shit. It's just, a visual kind of terrain deformation, and it doesn't really make ruts that you can actually dig into, which is quite unfortunate in a lot of these games where there's not any pre-made on them either, right? So it's one thing if you have a bunch of pre-made, like pre-made inside ruts and pre-made roughness, ruts going up jump faces, things like that. You don't necessarily have to have a terrain deformation system, right? But when you don't really have a terrain deformation system, and on top of that, you don't really have pre-made, it makes it pretty basic, man. It really does. Like, you had better have some pretty hardcore, like, jump skill gap and physics to the bike, skill gappy physics, inertia, skill gappy physics to the bike that fits that sort of jump skill gap and corner skill gap and shit like that. You'd better have quite a bit of that if you don't have at least, terrain deformation or pre-made. So, but either way, that's one thing I'd like to see in Supercross 5. An actual terrain deformation system, a little more like Reflex, actually grabs you, actually makes different kinds of ruts depending on what kind of track you're on, whether it's a hard pack track, sand track, normal dirt track, mud, right? That kind of segues into the whole mud in these games. I've thought pretty much in every single one of these games, it's not really felt like slick enough to me. It's not really felt like sketchy enough mud to me. It's always felt a little more like it just kind of has like a higher friction on the dirt, so the bike's just going a little bit slower, and it's ever so slightly feels a little bit more slick than riding on a track without the rain mode on. But other than that, it's really not much of a mud filling on the actual track itself, right? And it's kind of the way a lot of aspects of these official Supercross games are. They're very, they look really good. The rain and mud mode looks really good in these Supercross games. But the thing is, it's just you got to understand that it can look as good as it wants to. That don't necessarily mean anything. I don't know how I just crashed right there. I literally think that's the first time I've ever crashed in a whoop section in Supercross 1. I'm actually doing this video live right here, so it's tricky, dude. It's tricky playing any game and trying to talk at the same time. I don't give a hell who you are or how much you played a game. It's tricky trying to, keep a train of thought and talk about something and play a game at the same time, and that's what I'm doing right now. So that almost felt more like a bug how I crashed right there in those whoops than actually the whoops, taking me down. But either way, so yeah, it's a couple things I'd like to see. Obviously, like to see more track content, things like that. And I do think by the time we start to get more towards that Supercross 5, Supercross 6 range, I think we're really going to start to have some cool physics filling on the bike, experience to the games. I think they're finally going to get their shit together once it gets to that point. Supercross 3 impressed me in a lot of different ways compared to how their first two games were. I was happy about a lot of the actually having inertia to the bike and actual having jump skill gap and a wrist to coming up short and all that kind of stuff with Supercross 3. So, I think we're finally going to get, you may not get it in Supercross 4, right? It may take to, Supercross 5 or 6 or something like that before you get to that point where it truly is that, like, what I thought the first Supercross game was going to be or should have been or whatever you want to call it, right? I think they are eventually going to get to that point where it's got that full-blown skill gappy, awesome, more like reflexy filling, jump, huck system, awesome leaning forward and backwards system, really feeling like you can seat bounce the bike, and whoop skill gap, and big rhythm skill gap, and pre-made ruts, and a good terrain deformation system, and a good, better, more fluent flowing natural whip system, and all that kind of stuff. They definitely gave you a few more options with Supercross 3 on the whip system side of things, but I do think they're going to continue to improve on that, and it does suck that we've had to go through so many games to get there, and you've had to pay so much money to get to that point. But at the same time, eventually I do think we're going to have a pretty amazing official Monster Energy Supercross game at some point, especially now that Milestone got bought out by THQ Nordic and all that shit. I mean, you could see the changes they've made to the games and what they're trying to do with it. They're really trying to dig down deep to those, core Milestone physics and trying to actually change something between the games instead of just doing a copy and paste. It does seem like they're starting to go down more of that road now, so that's really good to see. We'll see kind of how that develops, but I mean, I don't see this train stopping. Like, I think people are just going to continue to buy these games, especially the official Supercross games. I could see where people would kind of stop buying the MXGP games after so many, replica over and over, exact copy and paste type games, but I just don't see people slowing down buying the official Supercross games. It don't matter what they do with it. Like, it don't matter if they go back to the first Supercross games physics. It don't matter if they take it to a whole nother level or not or whatever. I think they're still going to be able to sell copies of just off of the title of the game for at least another 2 or 3 games. Bare minimum, like at least another 2 or 3 games, and then it kind of starts to get to that point where the new has kind of weared off a little bit with the name and everything, and people are like, wow, we're on Supercross 69 now, this is insane, I'm probably not going to buy this one, right? It kind of starts to get to that point, but either way, it's interesting. They've went down a couple different paths. Supercross 1 was very easy, very basic, like one of the most basic gameplay, modern day AAA dirt bike games I have ever played in my entire life. I mean, when you look past the graphics and you look into the actual gameplay itself, it's literally a mobile motocross game as far as the physics of the bike and the skill gap and the lack of inertia and actual feeling to the physics, and not a huck system and no risk to coming up short or over jumping stuff. I mean, it literally is a mobile game. Like, is it fun for some people? Yeah, it is, because there's a lot of people out there that just don't really play these motocross games that much, so when they hop on there on like the first official Supercross game, it's pretty fun for them just because they get to see all the graphics and all the official riders, and they can go in there and look like they're James Stewart in like one day of playing the game, right? So it's fun for them, and I understand that, that's going to fit like a certain kind of audience, but the interesting thing about that, though, is even with Reflex, like, in a way, that game still fit that kind of an audience, but yet it also appealed to people that really wanted to play the game more seriously, get into it more hardcore, really have the skill gap and the roughness and the ruts and the jumping and hucking and hitting whoops and whipping the bike and all that kind of stuff. It was like it had the best of all the different worlds, I felt like, with Reflex, but yeah, and I think slowly but surely they have just started making their games more and more and more like Reflex, just getting a little more inertia. You finally had at least somewhat of a hucking, pulling up on the bike system with Supercross 3. Granted, it wasn't a crap load, but at least it was something, because there literally is basically none on the first Supercross game. I feel like when I'm playing the first Supercross game, it's almost like the game plays itself for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's about the best way I would explain. It's like the game literally plays itself for me. So it looks like you're going really fast. Looks like you're just badass on the bike and you're so good at this motocross game. And, you know, it's such a weird facade. It's such a bizarre thing because it's tricking you into thinking you're James Stewart in a video game, right? But in reality, it's like everybody can do this in the first Supercross game. Their literal first or second day playing the game. Like, there's just no real separating yourself, no real true, you know, skill gap system to the game. There's just not. But it just kind of fit that certain audience. And then, you know, with Supercross 2, they kind of started to advance the jumps a little bit. Didn't change the physics a whole lot. And then with Supercross 3, they have now really started to dig into those physics a little bit. And, you know, everybody and their grandmother can't just haul ass on Supercross 3. They can't. Like, they just can't. There's a lot of tracks in that game where there's more complicated rhythms. You know, you can actually lose quite a bit of momentum if you come up short on something. You can actually pop off the bike if you come up short on something, which is literally impossible in the first Supercross game. I could overjump something 300 foot or underjump the most gnarly, you know, the most gnarly jump ever, and you're not going to physically pop off of the bike on Supercross 1. It's just not going to happen. Period. So, and you know, with Supercross 1 not really having any other track content than the standard 17, you know, rounds of Supercross, didn't even have a free ride track until they came out with paid DLC, the one and only paid DLC free ride track. You know, and they've kind of advanced that throughout the game. So hopefully we'll start getting more content. Hopefully we'll start getting, you know, they came out with the cool Legends DLC with Supercross 3. And I think we're going to be getting 2 strokes with Supercross 3 as well with the season pass. I did get information on that. I just made a video on that. So we'll see kind of how they develop all that. We may have electric bikes in this game at some point if that starts to really get to popping back off in real life. There's just no telling, man. But we'll see kind of what they do. We'll see if they start. I mean, I think they're going to continue doing coming out with one of these games every single year. I really do, which is a little bit unfortunate, but because you don't see as many proper changes between each individual game as you should. But yeah. But I got high hopes for them, man. I really do. I think they've worked out a lot of the kinks that they've had in a lot of their games. I think they've went through that weird-ass phase of like that MXGP Pro jank-ass pop-off on every little jump. Let's try to make a sim arcade hybrid that totally failed type, you know, time frame of them making games between like, you know, MXGP Pro, Supercross 2, and MXGP 2019. Thank God they have finally started to kind of get out of that sort of phase. I do think you're going to start seeing better games now that they've kind of got through that. So, yeah. Either way, that's about all I have to say about Supercross 5. We should be getting it 2022, my dude. So, we got Supercross 4 on the way. We'll be able to go in there and look at that, see kind of what kind of changes they made on that. There I go again. I don't even know how I just did that. I had no idea. Like, the bike just literally did a 360 on the ground before I even got to the whoops. I don't even know how it did that. But yeah, either way. So, like I say, I think, you know, between Supercross 4, 5, and 6, you're going to have a pretty dandy one in there. One of them's going to be pretty good. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be literally full-blown to a reflex level, but it could be damn close. It could be super close to a reflex level type feeling on the bike and stuff. It may not have the content, stuff like that, of reflex and the track designs, but it should have somewhat of the level of feeling on the bike and, you know, leaning and hucking and skill gap. It should have all that in at least one of their next 3 games, right? So that'll be really interesting to see. But either way, definitely let me know down in the comments what you guys think we're going to see in Supercross 5. Obviously, I hope they continue to improve the track editor and all the other kind of, you know, customizable options, like being able to really full-blown customize the bikes to a, like, super degree like you can in some of these car racing games, where you can, you know, put stickers wherever you want to, you know, color the bike any color, customize every single little aspect of it. I think that'd be a cool way. And put stickers on your helmet where you want them and things like that. It'd be kind of cool if they started to kind of go down that road with it. But either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.